Hi, my name's Jane B, and I was the lead independent author for the Serious Case Review into Child O. So what I'm planning to do today is just to talk you through the Serious Case Review, our findings, our recommendations, and then to look at possibly how we can take this forward. You'll notice that I'm recording this in my living room, so welcome. We're in the middle of lockdown as I record this, so do bear with me. It might not be the best quality video and the best quality sound, but we're all working in a different way at the moment. So what I'm planning to do is remind ourselves why we're looking at the learning from children like Child O, to look at the history of Child O and what kind of brought him to our attention and where systems might have worked better, but also to look at the good practice and to consider the findings of the Serious Case Review and how we might take that forward into our practice. How we're going to do that is, first of all, I just want to talk about a little bit what a Serious Case Review is. For those of you who've read Working Together, well done. It's now called a Safeguarding Practice Review. And the purpose of a Safeguarding Practice Review is for agencies and individuals to learn lessons that improve the way in which they work, both individually and collectively, to safeguard and promote the welfare of children. Now, that definition that I use is one that Cambridgeshire put forward, and I really like it because it talks about individual improvement and collective improvement. And it's no good just assuming that everyone else will improve. We've got to look at our own practice too and how we work with others. And I think that's what I want to get from this. If you've got copies of slides, you'll also see that I've just added the words systems review methodology. Now, for this Serious Case Review or Practice Learning Review, we use the systems review methodology, and I prefer that way of working. The old kind of Serious Case Review traditional method was very linear. If you'd done this, this would have happened, and this would have happened, and the child wouldn't have died. But that's very blame. It's a very blame culture. So I prefer to use a systems review where we look at, was this a perfect storm for Child O, or actually are the systems surrounding children like him in place that might let this happen again? Is it a system failure? And if so, what can we do to change it, both individually and collectively? So, reasons for this Serious Case Review. Child O died suddenly in April 2018. At the time of his death, they were considering an initial child protection conference due to concerns of abuse. His cause of death following a post-mortem was unascertained, which always makes things a little bit more difficult. Pen picture wise, Child O was born in June 2015 in Pakistan. Following a very difficult delivery, he suffered from perinatal hypoxia, which left him with very complex health needs. He was brought to the UK in November 2016 to live with his father and his paternal aunt and uncle. Now, Mum stayed in Pakistan. She'd just given birth to twins, and she stayed there with her newborn babies. Child O went to live in quite a crowded home where 6 of his cousins also lived, so it was quite crowded for a child, particularly a child with the needs that he had. He attended nursery, who reported that he was well fed, chunky and happy. Timeline-wise, Child O's cousins were previously known to Children's Social Care, and they had been subject of child protection plans prior to his arrival from physical abuse both by mum and dad. In November 2016, Child O attended a paediatric clinic for the first time, and his aunt came with him. In February 2017, Child O was taken to a physiotherapy appointment, during which he was irritable and upset when he was moved. And following this, there was a change in his pattern of seizures, and he became increasingly unwell. His aunt was advised to take Child O to A&E and collect a change of prescription for him, but she failed to do this. She didn't take that advice. And then on the 10th of February 2017, Child O was brought to A&E by ambulance by his aunt. She reported that he was drowsy, having difficulty breathing, and he was found to have multiple fractures with no known cause. Obviously, that led to him being subject to a child protection plan, and his mother was brought back over from Pakistan. And that was a good move because Mum was well outside of the pool of people who may have injured Child O. so she came over to take care of him at a different address. Child O's cousins were all taken into care and looked after with child protection plans. Court proceedings were initiated, but after advice from a set of independent experts, the court ruled there was not enough evidence to conclude non-accidental injury. All contact restrictions were then removed. The children returned home. Following the court ruling, Aunt became very involved in Child O's care again. Now, the kind of crux of that bit was the independent court witnesses, and that caused a great deal of concern among the people who had initially raised concerns that these court witnesses who didn't know this child had said something different, and we'll come on to that. Concerns were expressed by advanced nurse practitioners to bruising to Child O's face and feet. Explanations were provided by Aunt and Mum. They kind of said potentially it could be his boots, the equipment that he's using. But there's nothing in the records to suggest that the bruising was considered in the context of these previous safeguarding concerns. In March 2018, plans were being made to remove Child O from his Children in Need plan, but the decision was delayed because professionals raised concerns about Aunt's increasing involvement in Child O's care, that she was starting to get very involved again, and they were worried. Professionals also reported a deterioration in Child O's physical presentation and expressed concerns about Aunt's control over his mother. So not just Aunt's involvement in his care, but also controlling behaviour she was showing to Child O's mother. Mum met with the social worker alone, and that was a big change. She highlighted her concerns about Child O and her relationship with her sister-in-law. Mum's English was not good and Aunt's was, so there was a bit of controlling behaviour there, but once Mum could speak to the social worker alone, things did begin to change. Later that month, a strategy meeting agreed that the case should be escalated back to child protection. Unfortunately, though, Child O died before this conference was held. So, what were our findings? Well, the role of the expert witness is not clearly understood by professionals, nor was it understood that the decision of the court could be challenged. So we thought that that was quite a learning point. The policy for bruising in immobile babies and children was not followed. The explanation for the bruising was accepted, leaving Child O at risk of harm. The thresholds for children who need to be under the Children with Additional Needs team is not clear. Some members of the family were invisible to professionals. Father and uncle, for example, who lived in the household, hardly featured in any of the professional visits and didn't feature in their assessments either. Information sharing wasn't always as robust as it should have been. Professional challenge was lacking. So Aunt was allowed to translate for her mother in appointments. Professionals accepted that Aunt had parental responsibility for Child O and didn't check this. And the lived experience of Child O wasn't always known. Attempts to seek it were quite ineffective. So from those findings, we came up with several recommendations, which I'll just run through with you now. We felt that the board should ensure that after court, so post-court, where the court has not accepted the findings of the original experts, a multi-agency meeting should be held. Now, the purpose of this is twofold. One, to share the court findings with professionals involved so they can raise concerns if appropriate. And two, to ensure that information is shared between agencies and a clear and robust plan of action is devised for the future. And that's particularly important where cases of injuries remained unexplained. So for Child O, it was really important. All right, it didn't meet the court threshold, but something had happened to Child O and that was still unexplained. And after court, it would have been really great for all the professionals to have met to take forward what they thought should happen. Recommendation 2, that the board should ensure that the role and function of court experts is disseminated to all professionals so that they understand that there may be a difference between their opinion and that of local professionals who raised concerns. It's the independence of the court expert that is key, and we need people to understand that in order to reduce their frustrations, and there were frustrations in this case. and allow them to raise concerns or contribute to the future plan at the post-court meeting. Number 3, all professionals, in particular health professionals, must use the Greater Manchester Protocol for bruising in non-mobile children and babies. They must know where to find it and should be clear that all bruising in non-mobile children and babies should be taken as a cause for concern unless you can completely rule it out. It should also be taken into context. So we should be looking at bruising in immobile children and babies in the context of safeguarding, particularly if there's been a history of it. Not using the protocol could lead to an unchallenged belief that everything's okay, that professional optimism that we sometimes show, and that leaves children at future risk of harm. Number 4, challenge between agencies using an escalation process should become normal practice, and we didn't feel that it was normal practice at the moment. The board should be able to provide guidance on how to hear and how to accept challenge professionally. Most escalations are resolved at level 1, but they should then be recorded really clearly by the agency making the escalation and the agency receiving it. Now, we felt from people we spoke to that that's all well and good, but actually it's really difficult to have time to do that. So it's really important that it becomes part of our culture to escalate something if we're not happy, and that accepting that challenge is not a personal slight. It's somebody saying to you, have you considered everything? We don't think you have. Can we help you with it? What do we need to do next? It's that kind of professional, wait a minute, let's have another look. Number 5, all agencies should be clear on their use of the translation services and how to access them for professionals. Professionals should not be routinely using family members or friends to translate in meetings. Now that's already in place, but in practice it's not happening. Number 6, in order to best understand and therefore safeguard a child, the lived experience of the child is required in both assessment and ongoing safeguarding work. So the board should address the lack of professional curiosity and challenge by professionals to families, including the understanding of invisible family members. Agencies should ensure staff understand the importance of asking questions and being tenacious, and should provide teams with the facilities in which to do this, possibly through increased practice reflection. Now again, in an ideal world, this would happen all the time, and we know that, but we need to build it into our practice as much as we can. What we want is every professional to say, hang on a minute, I'm not sure about that. I don't think that's good enough. I need to know more about this. I need to check my understanding on that. And sometimes the best way to do this is if somebody says to you, what was your understanding of that? So that reflection of your own practice. So if you're already getting practice reflection, use it to check your understanding and say, have I been professionally curious enough? If you're not getting practice reflection, that's what we'd like to build into the system so that you are challenged on your own challenge of your understanding. Professional curiosity. Okay. Number 7, the board should satisfy themselves that the thresholds for the children with additional needs team to become involved with a child are clear and robust. The referral process should be clear as well, and all agencies should understand the thresholds for these teams and how to refer children in. And we didn't feel that was happening at the moment. It's not all doom and gloom though. There was some really good practice which I'd also like to just reflect on and make sure that we don't forget. So health practitioners who could speak the same language as mum made themselves available whenever possible, and that really was helpful to mum. Early challenge by the police on aunts' children being removed from the child protection plans was good practice, and they'd clearly thought that out. The nursery had a really clear picture and a lovely picture of Chaldo as a person in his own right, and they'd really taken the time to record that. The tenacity of some individual members of staff who were concerned about Chaldo showed excellent practice. They showed professional curiosity, and they would not be swayed in their goal of seeking information, challenging family members, and keeping Chaldo at the centre of their focus. And that was really, really good practice. Arranging to speak with mum at the nursery and listening to her concerns, taking them seriously and reassuring her that she was believed, even though that happened very much towards the end, was excellent practice. Okay, so now we come to the bit where you're going to get involved, if you don't mind. So it's next steps. So what we really want you to do is to consider the learning and the good practice that we've discussed today, consider the findings and the recommendations that I've just gone through with you, and start to formulate a plan on how these recommendations can be implemented. Now remember that that's both individually and collectively, if you think back to our Cambridgeshire definition of a serious case review. So the facilitator for whatever meeting you're in at the moment is going to get you into groups now and come round and give you one finding or one recommendation to have a look at. If you get a recommendation where you need something else, you might need a copy of the escalation policy, for example, or you might need a copy of the bruising protocol for non-mobile children and babies. We've got those and you should have those with you today. And what we'd like you to do is in your groups is just to look at how individually and collectively you might take those recommendations forward. How could you personally and collectively work with that? What would it look like practically? So we want you to make some notes. You should have somebody who's going to help you facilitate that. And then what we really want is some examples that we can, as a board, take forward and really ground this. Thank you so much for taking part. I hope your discussions are successful. If you're also a professional who took part in the serious case review, thank you so much. It was a useful and difficult but successful, I hope, serious case review, and I wish you all the best taking forward the recommendations.